spoiled teens attacked a wheelchair woman and her dog until a Navy SEAL intervened. They thought she was defenseless, a woman in a wheelchair, alone except for her dog and young daughter. Easy prey for entitled teenagers who'd never faced real consequences. What they didn't know was that a retired Navy SEAL had just arrived in town, a man trained to protect the innocent and eliminate threats with surgical precision. They were about to learn that some people can't be intimidated and some protectors never truly stand down. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and if you want to support the channel, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. Pine Haven, Oregon existed where the Cascade Mountains surrendered to the Pacific, a town of 3,200 souls clinging to the edge of America like a barnacle to driftwood. November fog rolled in from the ocean each evening, thick and cold, swallowing the fishing boats at the marina and turning streetlights into pale ghosts. The rain came in sheets, not the gentle mist of spring, but the punishing autumn storms that stripped leaves from trees and turned dirt roads to mud. It was the kind of place people came to disappear, where the forest pressed close and the sea roared constant judgment against the rocks. Jack Morrison arrived on a Monday afternoon when the sky hung low and gray. His truck, a 2019 Ford F-150, still carrying dust from 3,000 miles of driving, pulled into the gravel drive of a rental cabin 8 miles outside town. The A-frame structure sat alone among Douglas firs, accessible only by a single-lane road that wound through forest thick enough to feel like a tunnel. No neighbors, no noise except wind and rain. Exactly what he'd requested. He was 38, but moved like a man who'd lived several lifetimes. 6 feet 2 inches of lean muscle, 210 pounds, distributed with the efficiency of someone who understood his body as a weapon and tool in equal measure. Close-cropped dark hair showed premature silver at the temples. A scar traced his left jawline from ear to chin, courtesy of shrapnel in Helmand Province. His eyes were steel gray and watchful, the kind that cataloged exits and threats without conscious thought. He wore jeans, a flannel shirt, and boots that had seen real use. Nothing about him invited conversation. The German shepherd that emerged from the passenger seat moved with identical economy of motion. Titan weighed 95 pounds, all dark sable coat, except for a distinctive white patch on his chest. 4 years old, trained in explosive detection and protection. Retired from active duty alongside Jack after the same mission that had ended both their military careers. The dog's amber eyes possessed an intelligence that unnerved strangers. This wasn't a pet. This was a partner, a weapon with fur and loyalty that transcended simple obedience. Jack unloaded gear with practiced efficiency. Duffel bags, tactical equipment he told himself he'd never need again. A rifle case he'd promised to leave locked. Titan ranged the perimeter of the property, nose working, establishing territory. The cabin interior was Spartan, kitchenette, wood stove, single bedroom with a mattress that had seen better days. Perfect. He needed isolation, needed distance from crowds and noise and the weight of expectations. 12 years as a Navy SEAL had hollowed him out in ways he was only beginning to acknowledge. The last mission, the extraction in Kabul that had succeeded tactically but failed in every moral measure, played on loop behind his eyes whenever silence lasted too long. He'd come to Pine Haven because it was nobody, nowhere, a spot on the map where he could breathe without the sensation of walls closing in. Terminal leave was supposed to be a transition, but Jack knew better. This wasn't a pause before civilian life. This was triage, an attempt to stop the bleeding before he became another statistic. That first night, rain hammered the roof while Jack sat by the wood stove with Titan at his feet. The dog's head rested on his boots, warm and solid. Outside, the forest creaked and whispered. Inside, for the first time in months, Jack felt the tension in his shoulders ease by fractional degrees. Maybe here, in this forgotten corner of the world, he could finally stop being Staff Sergeant Morrison. Maybe he could figure out who Jack was supposed to be. The next 2 days established a routine. Dawn runs through forest trails, Titan loping ahead, both of them moving through the trees like ghosts. Afternoons spent chopping firewood, the physical labor a meditation that quieted his mind. Evenings, reading by firelight, though he rarely remembered what the words said. He drove into Pine Haven proper, only once, to the general store for supplies. The town consisted of a single main street, diner, post office, sheriff's office, a handful of shops that looked perpetually on the verge of closing. Fishing boats crowded the marina. The smell of salt and diesel hung in the air. People glanced at him with the wariness small towns reserve for strangers. He kept interactions minimal. Yes, just visiting. No, not sure how long. The woman at the general store register had kind eyes and didn't push. He appreciated that. Thursday morning arrived cold and clear, the storm temporarily spent. Jack took Titan down a trail that wound toward the coast, following the sound of surf. The path opened into a viewpoint overlooking the Pacific, waves hammering black rocks 50 feet below. Titan ranged ahead, investigating scents, when suddenly the dog went rigid, ears swiveled forward, body locked in that particular stillness that meant threat detected. A low growl built in the animal's chest, barely audible but unmistakable. Jack's hand moved automatically to his hip, finding only empty belt. He'd left the sidearm at the cabin, trying to break the habit of constant armament. The sound reached him then. Raised voices carried on the wind, laughter with a cruel edge, a woman's voice, strained, trying to maintain composure. And underneath it all, a dog barking frantically. Jack moved toward the sound, Titan falling into position at his left heel without command. Through the trees, a scene emerged that made his jaw tighten. A narrow road switched back down toward the waterfront, and at a bend where gravel widened into a small turnout, a group had gathered. 5 teenagers, expensive outdoor gear and attitudes that screamed privilege, surrounded a woman in a wheelchair. Her service dog, a golden retriever mix, strained against its leash, barking warnings the teens ignored. Not his town. Not his problem. Jack had spent 12 years inserting himself into other people's wars. He'd come here specifically to stop doing that. He watched for another moment, telling himself he was assessing the situation, not looking for justification to walk away. The woman was maybe 40, Asian features, dark hair pulled back. Even from this distance, Jack could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the wheelchair arms. One of the boys, tall with that particular swagger of someone who'd never been told no, stood too close. His friends laughed at something Jack couldn't hear. The woman's dog lunged, protective, and one of the girls kicked at it. Not hard enough to connect, but the intent was clear. Jack felt Titan's muscles coil beneath fur. The shepherd had seen the kick too. A command hovered on Jack's lips. One word, and Titan would end this situation in seconds. But that wasn't who he was trying to be anymore. That was the problem he'd come here to escape. He turned away, leading Titan back up the trail toward the cabin. Behind them, the voices faded. The woman would be fine. Small-town harassment, nothing she probably hadn't dealt with before. Not his responsibility. He repeated it like a mantra with each step, trying to convince himself the tightness in his chest was just exertion from the hike. That afternoon, Jack couldn't shake the image of the woman's face. He told himself it was nothing, just residual hypervigilance from years of combat rotations. He chopped wood behind the cabin with more force than necessary, splitting logs with single strikes that sent splinters flying. Titan watched from the porch, head cocked, reading his partner's mood with the accuracy of 4 years spent in foxholes and transport vehicles together. By evening, Jack had convinced himself he'd overreacted. Teenagers being idiots wasn't a crisis. The woman had probably handled it and moved on. He heated a can of soup on the wood stove and ate without tasting it, then settled into the single chair with a book he wouldn't remember reading. Friday morning brought him back into town. He needed propane and his coffee supply was running low. The general store sat on Main Street next to a diner called Nari's, and Jesk parked his truck in front, leaving windows cracked for Titan. The dog would alert if anyone approached the vehicle, a habit from deployments that neither of them had shaken. Inside, the store smelled like old wood and coffee. Jack was comparing propane prices when he heard the bell above the door chime. He glanced up reflexively, always cataloging who entered his space, and saw her. The woman from the trail, maneuvering her wheelchair through the entrance with practiced efficiency. Behind her, a girl of maybe 8 held the door open, small hands gripping the frame. The woman navigated to the counter where an older man in a flannel shirt was organizing lottery tickets. Her voice carried across the quiet store, polite but firm. "Mr. Henderson, I need to report another incident. Yesterday, on Canyon Road. The Van Horn boy and his friends blocked my car, surrounded me for nearly 20 minutes. Henderson's expression tightened with something that looked like pity mixed with discomfort. Maggie, you know I can't do anything about that. Boys were probably just talking to you. They slashed my tire, the woman said. Maggie, Jack now knew. After they left, I found it flat. My daughter and I were stranded until Sarah Kwan drove by and helped us change it. You got proof it was them? Henderson's tone suggested he didn't want proof. Emma saw them, Maggie said, gesturing to the girl, who now stood close to her mother's chair, eyes downcast. Connor Reed had a knife in his hand when they walked away. Henderson sighed, the sound of a man confronting a problem he had no intention of solving. That's a serious accusation. The Reed family won't take kindly to their boy being called a criminal without evidence. I'm not asking you to arrest anyone. Maggie's voice remained steady, but Jack could hear the strain beneath it. I'm asking you to make a report. Document what's happening. Because it's getting worse, and when something serious happens, I want it on record that I tried to get help. If you're that worried, maybe you should reconsider Garrett Van Horn's offer. Henderson wouldn't meet her eyes. Man's been more than fair about wanting to buy your property. Could take that money, move somewhere easier for you and Emma. Fresh start. Jack watched Maggie's hands tighten on her wheelchair arms, knuckles going white. That property was my parents' home. It's Emma's home. We're not leaving because some developer wants waterfront for another luxury resort this town doesn't need. Suit yourself. Henderson turned back to his lottery tickets. But don't expect the whole town to go to war with Van Horn over your stubbornness. The dismissal was complete. Maggie sat motionless for a moment, and Jack saw her jaw work as she processed the betrayal. Then she turned her wheelchair with sharp efficiency and headed for the door. Emma followed, silent as a ghost. Jack moved without conscious decision. He reached the door first, pulled it open, held it wide. Maggie looked up at him, surprise flickering across features that were carefully composed to hide hurt. Up close, Jack could see she was younger than he'd first estimated. Maybe 42, with intelligent dark eyes that had seen too much disappointment recently. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded. No words necessary. Emma slipped past, and Jack caught her glancing at him with that particular assessment children develop when they've learned adults can't always be trusted. Then they were gone, Maggie navigating the ramp to the parking lot, where an older sedan with handicap plates waited. Jack returned to the counter with his propane and coffee. Henderson rang him up without comment, until Jack was pocketing his change. Then the older man spoke, voice low. You're the fellow renting the Miller cabin. Morrison, right? That's right. Piece of advice, free of charge. Henderson's eyes were flat. Maggie Chen's situation is unfortunate, but it's local business. Outsiders who stick their nose in tend to find Pine Haven less welcoming than they'd like. Jack held his gaze for 3 seconds of silence that communicated more than words. Then he collected his purchases and walked out. Behind him, he heard Henderson mutter something under his breath. Outside, Titan's head appeared in the truck window, focused past Jack toward the sedan where Maggie was helping Emma into the back seat. The dog's ears were forward, posture alert, but not aggressive. Jack had seen this before, Titan's particular awareness when he identified someone vulnerable who needed protection. The dog had done it with children in Afghan villages, with female soldiers dealing with harassment, with anyone his training and instinct marked as requiring defense. Not our problem, Jack told the dog quietly as he loaded the propane. Titan looked at him with those amber eyes that somehow conveyed skepticism. Jack drove back to the cabin, taking the long route, telling himself it was to see more of the area. The road wound past the turnout where he'd seen the confrontation yesterday. He slowed without meaning to, scanning the gravel. There, near the edge where the road dropped off toward the waterfront, he spotted the dark stain of tire rubber and scarring on the pavement, evidence of a vehicle stopping hard, skidding. His eyes tracked to the shoulder and found deep wheelchair tracks in the soft earth, the kind made by someone trying to maneuver quickly on unstable ground. She'd been trying to get away. The teenagers hadn't just surrounded her, they'd forced her off the road. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He accelerated past, forcing his attention forward. Not his town, not his fight. He'd spent 12 years solving other people's problems with violence, sanctioned by flag and orders. He'd come here specifically to stop being that person. But that night, sleep wouldn't come. The cabin felt too quiet despite the rain starting up again, drumming the roof. Titan paced between the door and Jack's bed, restless in a way that meant the dog sensed something wrong. Near midnight, the shepherd moved to the window facing the road. Body going still. Jack rose, crossed to the window. Through rain-distorted glass, he saw nothing but darkness and trees. But Titan's growl built low in his chest, that subsonic warning of threat detected beyond human senses. Then Jack heard it, faint, carried on the wind between rain gusts. A dog barking frantically. Not Titan's deep bark, but something higher-pitched, desperate. And underneath it, a sound that made his blood ice over. A child screaming. The sounds came from the direction of the waterfront, where the road switched back down through dense forest toward the properties Henderson had mentioned. Maggie Chen's property, Jack realized with sudden certainty. He stood frozen, warfare erupting inside him. This was exactly what he'd come here to escape. The constant readiness, the assumption that every problem required his intervention. The weight of being responsible for protecting everyone who couldn't protect themselves. But Emma's scream cut through the rain again, raw with terror. Jack was moving before conscious thought finished. He grabbed his tactical vest from the closet, the one he'd sworn he wouldn't need. His sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226, went into the holster. Flashlight, knife, phone. 20 seconds from decision to fully equipped. Titan waited at the door. Every line of his body screaming readiness. Just a look, Jack told himself and the dog. Just to make sure they're okay, then we're done. But as he headed into the rain with Titan at his heel, Jack knew he was lying. He'd seen too much, heard too much. Whatever was happening at the Chen property wasn't teenage harassment anymore. The sounds that carried through the November storm told him this had escalated to something worse. Something that would require exactly the skills he'd been trying to leave behind. The truck's headlights carved tunnels through rain and darkness as Jack navigated the switchback road. He killed the lights a quarter-mile out, relying on memory of the terrain and what moonlight penetrated the storm clouds. Titan sat rigid in the passenger seat, head thrust forward, every sense locked on whatever waited ahead. Jack parked on the shoulder where forest provided cover and stepped into the deluge. Rain soaked through his jacket in seconds, cold and punishing. He moved toward the tree line with Titan matching his pace, both of them falling into patterns drilled by countless missions. The dog understood silence, understood threat assessment, understood that right now they were working. Through the trees, lights appeared. A house, small and well-maintained, sat on a cleared lot that sloped down to the waterfront. Jack could see the Pacific beyond, waves white-capped and violent in the storm. What he saw in the yard made his jaw clench. 3 vehicles blocked the driveway. Expensive trucks, lifted suspensions, light bars that turned night into day. 5 figures moved around the property with the confidence of people who'd never faced consequences. Jack recognized the tall boy from the trail confrontation. His swagger unmistakable even at this distance. They weren't just harassing anymore, they were destroying. One teenager swung a baseball bat into a window, safety glass spiderwebbing with a crack audible over the rain. Another spray-painted obscenities across the house's front wall in jagged letters that dripped like blood. A girl filmed everything on her phone, laughing, directing the others like this was content creation instead of felony vandalism. But what locked Jack's attention was the scene near the waterfront. Maggie Chen sat in her wheelchair at the end of a wooden dock, Emma clutching her mother's arm. The dock extended 20 feet over black water that churned with storm surge. Behind them, a 4th teenager held a knife, using it to gesture them further toward the edge. Maggie's service dog, Biscuit, lay on the dock boards whimpering. Blood matted the golden fur along his side. They'd hurt the dog. They'd terrorized a child. And now they were trapping a disabled woman on a storm-battered dock where one wrong move meant drowning in the Pacific. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was attempted murder. Jack's hand moved to his sidearm, muscle memory and training calculating angles, distances, threat priorities. 5 targets. 2 with weapons visible, the knife and the baseball bat. The girl with the phone was unarmed, but complicit. 30 yards of open ground between his position and the closest target. Wind gusting to 20 knots, affecting accuracy. The dock situation critical, innocent lives in immediate danger. He could end this in under 10 seconds. 5 rounds, 5 targets down before they understood what was happening. Clean, efficient, permanent. His finger rested on the holster release. Then Emma's face turned toward the forest, rain-soaked and terrified, and Jack saw his goddaughter Alicia in those features. Alicia, who'd been Emma's age when the IED took her father in Kandahar. Alicia, who Jack had promised to protect, who'd looked at him with those same desperate eyes at the funeral, silently begging him to make sense of senseless violence. He couldn't kill these kids, couldn't add 5 more bodies to the count that already haunted him. But he could sure as hell stop them. Jack moved from the tree line like a predator. Titan flowing beside him. They covered the open ground in seconds, angle of approach keeping them invisible to the teenagers focused on their destruction. Jack reached the first one, the boy with the spray paint, before any alarm was raised. His hand clamped on the kid's shoulder and spun him around. The teenager had time to register surprise before Jack's other hand secured the spray can, and his voice cut through the rain, low and absolutely calm. "Drop it and get on your knees." The boy's eyes went wide. He was maybe 19, expensive haircut, face flushed with adrenaline and entitlement. "Who the hell are you? This is private property." Jack increased pressure on the shoulder, finding the nerve cluster that sent pain shooting down the arm. The spray can clattered to the ground. Knees. Now. Movement erupted across the yard. The boy with the baseball bat spun toward them, weapon raised. "Tyler, we got a problem." So the tall one was Tyler. Jack filed that information alongside everything else his training cataloged automatically. Tyler Van Horn. Henderson had mentioned that name. The developer's son. Titan. Watch. The command sent the German Shepherd into a different mode. Titan moved between Jack and the approaching threat, body low, teeth visible in a snarl that carried over the storm. The boy with the bat froze mid-step as 95 pounds of trained aggression locked eyes with him. "That dog attacks me, I'll sue you for everything." "Very thing." The kid started. "Titan doesn't attack," Jack said, maintaining his grip on the first teenager while his eyes swept the scene. "He neutralizes threats. You're holding a weapon, while your friend has a knife on a disabled woman and a child. You're the threat. Lower the bat and step away from it, or I give him one more word and you'll need surgery to repair what he does to your arm." The baseball bat hit the ground. "Smart kid, at least marginally." Tyler's voice carried from near the house. "Do you know who my father is? Garrett Van Horn owns this town. You just assaulted his son. Deputy Chief Briggs is on our payroll. You're finished." Jack's voice remained perfectly level, that particular calm that came from absolute certainty of his capabilities. "Your father owns property. He doesn't own human beings. And right now, I'm watching you commit multiple felonies, including assault, animal cruelty, and what looks like attempted murder. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell your friend to drop that knife and step away from those people. You're going to get in your trucks and leave. And you're going to pray I don't decide to make this a law enforcement matter. You can't do anything to us," the girl with the phone said, still filming. "This is assault. We're defending ourselves on property we're legally trying to acquire." Jack's eyes shifted to her, and whatever she saw in that gaze made her phone drop slightly. "You're filming evidence of your own crimes. That makes you either stupid or confident someone will protect you. I'm betting both. Now move toward your vehicle or I'll add you to the list of people Titan needs to educate about consequences." For a moment, the tableau held. Rain hammered down. The ocean roared against rocks. Then Tyler made his decision. The arrogance of someone who'd never truly lost asserting itself. "Connor, finish it. Push them off." The boy on the dock, Connor, raised his knife. Emma screamed. Maggie pulled her daughter close, wheelchair locked in place by manual brakes that were all that stood between them and the water. Jack moved. He released the first teenager with a shove that sent him sprawling, drew his sidearm in one fluid motion, and his voice cracked like a whip. "Titan, guard." The dog launched forward, covering the distance to the dock in heartbeats. Connor turned, knife rising, and Titan hit him like a missile. The impact drove the teenager backward, away from Maggie and Emma. The knife flew from his hand, disappeared into the darkness. Connor went down on the dock boards with 95 pounds of snarling fury standing on his chest, jaws inches from his throat. Jack's weapon tracked to Tyler. "Tell him to stay down, or I promise you'll regret it." Tyler's face twisted with rage and fear. "Connor, don't move, don't move." Jack advanced toward the dock, weapon maintained on Tyler, but awareness extending to every threat. The boy with the bat hadn't moved. The first teenager still sprawled in the mud. The girl had dropped her phone entirely, hands raised. "All of you, vehicles, now," Jack said. "You've got 10 seconds before I change my mind about calling this in to authorities who aren't on your father's payroll." Federal authorities who will be very interested in a pattern of hate crimes against a disabled woman. They ran. Tyler and his crew scrambled for their trucks with the panic of people suddenly understanding they'd miscalculated badly. Engines roared to life. Tires spun in mud and gravel. Within 30 seconds, taillights disappeared up the switchback road. Jack moved to the dock. "Tighten, release." The dog stepped back from Connor, who lay gasping, face white with terror. Jack hauled him up by his collar. "You're going to walk to your vehicle and drive away. If I ever see you on this property again, I won't stop my dog. Understand?" Connor nodded frantically. Jack released him and the teenager ran, limping, toward a truck that had remained running. It fishtailed away into the night. Silence fell except for the storm. Jack holstered his weapon and turned to Maggie and Emma. The woman stared at him with an expression that mixed relief, shock, and a dozen questions. Emma still clutched her mother's arm, shaking with fear and cold. Jack knelt beside Biscuit first. The golden retriever mix whimpered as Jack examined the wound. Shallow cut along the ribs, bleeding but not critical. The dog would need stitches but would survive. "He's okay," Jack said. "Needs a vet, but he'll be fine." "Who are you?" Maggie's voice trembled despite obvious efforts to control it. "Someone passing through." Jack met her eyes. "I'm taking you and Emma inside. Then I'm calling someone who can help. The police won't. Not local police." Jack stood, moved to the wheelchair. "Federal contacts. This just became a civil rights issue. May I?" Maggie nodded, and Jack released the brake, began maneuvering the wheelchair back down the dock. Emma walked beside them, silent, her small hand finding Titan's fur. The dog leaned into her touch, providing comfort the way he'd been trained. Inside the house, Jack took in the damage with tactical assessment. Windows broken, walls defaced, furniture overturned. But the structure was sound. He got Maggie and Emma settled, started a fire in the wood stove, found blankets. Emma sat close to her mother while Titan lay beside Biscuit, the two dogs pressed together. Jack pulled out his satellite phone, the one with encryption and direct lines to people who owed him favors. His call was answered on the second ring. "This is Morrison. I need FBI involvement in Pine Haven, Oregon. Civil rights violation. Possible RICO predicate acts. Local law enforcement compromised." He listened for a moment. "Yeah, I'm sure. And I need it fast. They're going to come back." He ended the call and found Maggie watching him. Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You're military." "Was." Jack said, "And now you're involved in something you didn't want to be part of." Jack looked at Emma, at this 8-year-old girl who'd been terrorized in her own home, and felt something shift in his chest. The weight he'd been carrying, the guilt and exhaustion, hadn't disappeared, but it had acquired purpose. "Now I'm making sure you and your daughter stay safe," he said. "Whatever it takes." Jack spent the next hour securing the property. He boarded the broken windows with plywood he found in Maggie's garage, moving through the house with methodical efficiency while Titan maintained perimeter watch. Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted by terror and adrenaline crash. Maggie watched Jack work, questions forming behind eyes that were sharp despite the trauma. When the immediate repairs were finished, Jack made coffee. They sat at the kitchen table, mugs warming hands that still trembled slightly. Outside, the storm showed no signs of relenting. "You should know what you've gotten yourself into," Maggie said quietly, voice low to avoid waking Emma. "Garrett Van Horn isn't just some developer. He owns half the county. The mayor, the sheriff, most of the city council. Anyone who opposes him finds their business permits delayed, their property taxes reassessed, their lives made difficult until they leave or capitulate." "Tell me everything," Jack said. The story emerged in pieces. Maggie's late husband David had been a federal prosecutor in Portland, specializing in environmental crimes. 3 years ago, they'd been driving home from a benefit dinner when a truck ran them off Highway 101. David died instantly. Maggie's spine was crushed at L2, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. The truck was never found. The investigation concluded it was a tragic accident. 6 months after the crash, Van Horn made his first offer for the waterfront property. Maggie refused. The offers increased, each one accompanied by pressure. Permits for wheelchair ramp improvements mysteriously stalled. Her physical therapy appointments were canceled due to insurance issues that took weeks to resolve. Small harassments that could be dismissed individually but formed a pattern of coordinated intimidation. Then Tyler Van Horn and his crew had started their campaign: slashed tires, threatening messages, the incident on Canyon Road. Each time Maggie reported it, Deputy Chief Briggs took a statement and did nothing. Henderson at the general store had made it clear the town wouldn't support her against Van Horn's money and influence. David found something before he died, Maggie said, hands wrapped around her mug. He wouldn't tell me details, said he needed to be sure before he made accusations. But he mentioned Van Horn's name, said the resort development was a front for something larger. Money laundering maybe, or land fraud. He was building a case. Jack's tactical mind assembled the pieces. A federal prosecutor investigating a powerful developer, a convenient accident, escalating pressure on the widow. You think Van Horn had your husband killed? I can't prove it. Maggie's voice carried 3 years of frustrated grief. But David was careful. He didn't take risks on the road. And the truck that hit us, witnesses said it was waiting on the shoulder, accelerated directly into our lane. That's not an accident. That's an execution. Where are David's case files? The prosecution office said they were reassigned after his death. But David kept copies of everything at home. I found encrypted files on a drive hidden in his office. I can't access them. The password died with him. Jack filed that information. Encrypted files meant evidence, possibly enough to bring federal attention. My contact at the FBI will want those files. Even encrypted, their tech people might crack them. Your contact. Maggie studied him across the table. You're not just former military. You're someone with serious connections. Navy SEAL, 12 years, retired 2 months ago. Jack saw no point in deflecting. She deserved to know who'd inserted himself into her life. I came to Pinehaven to be alone, to figure out what comes next. That plan lasted about 3 days. You can still walk away, Maggie said. Van Horn will make your life hell if you don't. Jack thought about that. About the cabin in the woods, the isolation he'd sought, the peace he'd thought he needed. Then he looked at Emma sleeping on the couch, small and vulnerable, and at Biscuit lying beside Titan, both dogs watching the doors. He thought about David Chen, a federal prosecutor trying to do the right thing, murdered for it. About Maggie, refusing to be driven from her home despite losing everything else. I've spent 12 years walking into other people's wars, Jack said. I'm tired of it. But I'm more tired of watching good people get crushed by the powerful, because nobody stands up. So no, I'm not walking away. Not until you and Emma Ma are safe, and Van Horn answers for what he's done. Maggie's eyes glistened. Thank you. Meanwhile, 15 miles north, inside a glass and steel mansion perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, Garrett Van Horn was learning about the night's failure. He sat behind a desk made from reclaimed ship timber, each piece worth more than most people's cars, and listened to his son make excuses over speakerphone. He had a military dog, Dad. Attacked Connor. The guy pulled a gun on us. You let one man with a dog run you off? Garrett's voice was ice. 56 years old, third-generation wealth, Yale-educated and morally bankrupt, he built an empire on knowing exactly how much pressure to apply to make problems disappear. 5 of you couldn't handle one civilian? He wasn't civilian. Tyler's voice carried fear underneath the bluster. The way he moved, how he commanded that dog. Connor said it was like being hunted by something that killed for a living. And he mentioned federal authorities. He's connected. Garrett processed that. A trained operator, someone with federal contacts, who'd inserted himself into a situation that was 99% resolved. The Chen woman had been days from breaking. Now she had a protector, and if that protector made good on his threat to bring federal attention, everything Garrett had built was at risk. Find out who he is, Garrett said. I want a name, background, vulnerabilities. Use Connor's tech skills for something useful, and pull back from the Chen property for now. Let me handle this through official channels. He ended the call and swiveled his chair to face the windows. Rain lashed the glass. Below, waves hammered rocks with mindless violence. Garrett had used this view for 2 decades to remind himself that nature didn't care about fairness or justice. Only the strong survived. He'd ensured his strength through careful cultivation of power, money spread strategically to make sheriffs cooperative and mayors compliant. One former soldier wouldn't change that. But one soldier could bring scrutiny Garrett couldn't afford. The resort development was legitimate, but it was built on land acquired through coercion, permits approved through bribery, and environmental regulations ignored through purchased influence. Federal investigators would find threads that, if pulled, would unravel everything. David Chen had been such a thread. Garrett had handled it with permanent efficiency, made it look like an accident, waited for the widow to crumble. She should have sold and disappeared. Instead, she'd stayed, and now she had an ally. Garrett picked up his phone and dialed Deputy Chief Warren Briggs. The man answered immediately, voice rough with sleep. "Mr. Van Horn, it's 2 a.m. There's a man staying at the Miller cabin. Former military, possibly Navy SEAL, has a German Shepherd. I need you to find a reason to roust him. Check his permits, vehicle registration, anything. Make his presence in Pine Haven uncomfortable enough that he decides to leave. Sir, if he's really military, especially special forces, pushing him could escalate. Then be smart about it." Garrett's patience had limits. "You've been on my payroll for 8 years, Warren. You know how this works. Find leverage or find another job. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." Garrett ended the call and returned his attention to the storm. One way or another, the Chen problem would be resolved, and the soldier who thought he could play hero would learn that Pine Haven belonged to Garrett Van Horn. Every inch of it, every person in it. Back at the Chen house, Jack's satellite phone buzzed. He stepped onto the porch to take the call, Titan following. The dog ranged into the yard, checking perimeter, while Jack listened to his FBI contact. "Your civil rights case has legs," Special Agent Victoria Marsh said. Her voice carried the clipped efficiency of someone used to cutting through bureaucracy. "Disabled victim, evidence of coordinated harassment, local law enforcement compromised. I can have a team there in 48 hours. But Jack, if this connects to organized crime or corruption, you need to extract. You're a civilian now. No legal protection for direct action." "Understood," Jack said. "I'm just keeping her alive until you arrive. The way your file reads, you don't do anything just. You solve problems permanently. Don't give me a mess to clean up." 2 days, Jack confirmed. "Can you expedite?" "I'll try. And Jack, whoever you're up against, if they're smart, they're researching you right now. Your service record is sealed, but rumors travel. Someone determined enough will figure out you're not just military. You're a force multiplier. That makes you a threat worth eliminating." The call ended. Jack stood in the rain, processing. 48 hours until federal help arrived. 2 days to keep Maggie and Emma safe while Van Horn mobilized his resources. The developer would come at them through channels Jack couldn't counter with tactical skills alone. Legal pressure, bureaucratic warfare, maybe even false charges to remove Jack from the equation. Inside, Maggie had wheeled to the window. She watched him through the glass, and Jack saw recognition in her eyes. She understood that he'd just committed fully, that whatever came next, he'd stand between her family and the people trying to destroy them. The rain fell harder. Titan returned too. To Jack's side, coat soaked, eyes scanning the darkness, man and dog stood together in the storm, both of them understanding that the night's violence had been just the beginning. Van Horn would respond. The question was how fast and how brutal. Jack checked his watch. 02:37 hours. In Afghanistan, this was the hour when insurgents launched their most aggressive attacks, counting on fatigue and darkness to provide advantage. He wouldn't make the mistake of assuming American soil meant different rules. Predators were predators, regardless of geography. "Let's go to work," he told Titan. They had 2 days to prepare for a war that was already coming. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold. Jack had spent the pre-dawn hours fortifying Maggie's property with improvised security measures. Motion-activated lights from the hardware store, fishing lines stretched across approach routes at ankle height. Tin cans filled with rocks, positioned where they'd clatter if disturbed. Nothing sophisticated, but effective early warning systems that would buy seconds in a crisis. Seconds were often the difference between life and death. Emma woke first, padding into the kitchen where Jack was making coffee. She stopped in the doorway, studying him with that old soul assessment children develop when trauma has taught them to evaluate threats. Titan lay beside the wood stove, raised his head in greeting, and Emma's tension eased fractionally. "Is Mom safe now?" Her voice was small but direct. No games, no childish deflection. She wanted truth. Jack crouched to her level, meeting her eyes. "I'm going to do everything I can to keep you both safe, but I need you to be smart and brave. Can you do that?" Emma nodded. "I'm good at being quiet, and I always do what Mom says." "That's perfect." Jack saw his goddaughter Alicia in this girl's resilience. That particular strength children found when circumstances demanded it. "If anything scary happens, you stay with your mom and Biscuit. Titan and I will handle the rest." Maggie emerged from her bedroom, maneuvering her wheelchair with practiced efficiency, despite obvious exhaustion. Jack had heard her moving during the night, restless, probably processing trauma and recalculating her life around this new reality where a stranger had become their shield. Over breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast Jack prepared with military functionality they planned. Maggie needed to retrieve David's encrypted files from her late husband's office, a converted bedroom at the back of the house. Jack wanted those files secured before Van Horn realized their significance. They also needed supplies, enough to withstand siege if it came to that. "I'll go into town," Jack said. "You and Emma stay here, doors locked, Titan on guard. I'll be 2 hours maximum." "They'll know your truck," Maggie warned. "Henderson will have told everyone by now about the stranger asking questions." "Good. Let them look at me instead of you." Jack took Titan, reasoning the dog's presence would deter casual harassment. The drive into Pinehaven confirmed Maggie's prediction. Eyes followed his truck down Main Street with undisguised hostility. At the hardware store, the owner served him with cold efficiency, no small talk. At the grocery, the checkout clerk processed his items in silence, wouldn't meet his gaze. He was loading supplies when a sheriff's SUV pulled into the lot, angling to block his truck. Deputy Chief Warren Briggs emerged, 51 years old, carrying the particular paunch of a man who'd stopped training decades ago. 2 younger deputies flanked him, hands resting on their service weapons with theatrical intimidation. "Jack Morrison," Briggs said, consulting a notepad with obvious performance. "Renting the Miller cabin. Registration shows your vehicle is from Montana. You're a long way from home." "Just visiting." Jack continued loading groceries, movements unhurried. "We got a complaint last night. Assault and battery, terrorist threats, illegal use of an attack dog. The Van Horn boy says you pulled a weapon on him and just friends." Jack straightened, met Briggs' eyes. The deputy chief couldn't hold the gaze for more than 2 seconds. Tyler Van Horn and 4 accomplices were committing multiple felonies on private property. I intervened to prevent immediate harm to a disabled woman and a child. "You want to charge me? I'll provide a detailed statement to federal investigators arriving in 48 hours. Briggs' face tightened. "Federal investigators? You're not in a position to make threats." "Not a threat, a fact." FBI Special Agent Victoria Marsh is sending a team to investigate civil rights violations, possible RICO predicate acts, and local law enforcement corruption. When they arrive, I'll be happy to discuss last night in detail, including how many times Maggie Chen reported harassment to your department without action. "You're out of your depth, son." Briggs stepped closer, dropping the official pretense. "Garrett Van Horn has resources you can't imagine. He can make you disappear, legally or otherwise. Smart move is to drive that truck back to Montana before you end up regretting this heroic impulse." Jack's voice dropped to that particular calm that preceded violence. "I've faced insurgents with RPGs and car bombs. I've operated in countries where warlords controlled entire provinces through terror. You think a small-town developer scares me? I've dealt with worse before breakfast." One of the younger deputies, maybe 25, with a buzz cut that screamed prior service, read something in Jack's posture. He put a hand on Briggs's shoulder. "Chief, we should go." "We're just talking," Briggs said, but uncertainty had entered his voice. "No, sir, we're not." The young deputy's eyes stayed on Jack. "This man's military, special forces if I'm reading it right. We push him, it ends badly for everyone. We should clear out." Briggs struggled between ego and survival instinct. Survival won. "This isn't over, Morrison." "It is for now." Jack climbed into his truck. Titan watched from the passenger seat, silent but ready. And deputy, when the FBI arrives, you might want to consider cooperation. They'll be very interested in who's been on Van Horn's payroll and for how long. The sheriff's SUV pulled away. Jack sat for a moment, processing. The confrontation had been inevitable, but it confirmed Van Horn was moving fast, using official channels to apply pressure. The developer was scared enough to act, but not desperate enough to be stupid. That would change. The young deputy who'd shown sense appeared at Jack's window. Up close, his name tag read Simmons. You really former SEAL? Why does it matter? Because if you are, you know how this ends. Van Horn has the mayor, the sheriff, half the county commissioners. You can't win against that kind of institutional power. I don't need to win, Jack said. I just need to keep 2 people alive for 48 hours until people who aren't corrupt arrive. Simmons nodded slowly. Then you should know Tyler Van Horn is calling in favors. His crew plus some out-of-town muscle. I heard them talking about tonight, about finishing what they started. I can't stop it officially, but I wanted you warned. Why help me? Because I joined law enforcement to protect people, not to be a rich man's enforcer. What's happening to Mrs. Chen is wrong, and I'm ashamed I haven't done more to stop it. Simmons glanced over his shoulder, checking for observers. If you need backup tonight, call my cell. I'll come. It'll cost me my job, but I'll come. He passed a card through the window and walked away before Jack could respond. Small mercies, Jack thought. One decent cop in a corrupted department. It might be enough. Back at the Chen house, Jack unloaded supplies and explained the encounter. Maggie listened with the expression of someone whose worst assumptions about the world were being confirmed. They're coming tonight, she said. Not a question. Probably. Van Horn knows federal help is inbound. He'll want this resolved before outside scrutiny arrives. Jack checked his watch. 4 hours until sunset. We prepare. Turn this house into a hard point they can't easily breach. They worked through the afternoon. Jack reinforced doors with lumber, covered remaining windows with plywood that still allowed firing ports. He positioned his rifle with clear sight lines to approach routes. Maggie gathered Emma's most important possessions, photographs and documents, into a waterproof bag positioned near the back door. Emergency evacuation planning. The kind Jack had done in 100 hostile villages. Emma helped where she could, carrying supplies, keeping Biscuit calm. The golden retriever sensed the tension, stayed close to the girl with protective instinct that mirrored Titan's military training. Both dogs formed a defensive partnership, alternating perimeter checks, communicating through body language and low sounds. At 1600 hours, Jack's satellite phone buzzed. Special Agent Marsh's voice carried bad news. We hit a complication. The team I was sending got diverted to a domestic terrorism situation in Seattle. Earliest I can get people to you is Monday morning. Can you hold for another 36 hours? 36 hours. Jack looked at Maggie, at Emma sitting close to her mother, at this fragile fortress they built against the coming storm. We'll hold. Jack, if you need extraction, we can coordinate with Coast Guard or State Police. State Police will report to the same people who've been ignoring this situation. And extraction means leaving Maggie vulnerable. We stay and hold. Then God help anyone who comes at you tonight. The call ended. Jack didn't believe in God anymore. Hadn't since watching good people die for bad reasons in too many countries. But he believed in training, preparation, and the absolute commitment to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. That would have to be enough. Dusk fell like a curtain. Jack positioned himself near the front window, rifle beside him, watching the road. Titan sat alert, ears tracking sounds beyond human hearing. The house was dark except for the wood stove's glow, every light extinguished to prevent silhouetting targets. Maggie had put Emma to bed early, then wheeled to position beside Jack. Tell me the truth. What are our chances? Jack considered lying, offering false comfort, but she deserved honesty. If they come with 5 kids playing tough, we're fine. If Van Horn sends professionals, serious contractors willing to commit murder, it gets harder. I can hold off a lot, but I'm one man. Eventually, numbers win. So we might die tonight. We might. But they'll pay such a high price that every law enforcement agency in the state will descend on Van Horn. Your daughter will be protected, and your husband's. Death will be investigated properly. Sometimes the win isn't survival. It's making sure the fight matters. Maggie reached out, squeezed his hand. David would have liked you. Before Jack could respond, Titan's body went rigid. The growl that built in the dog's chest was subsonic, felt more than heard. Jack's hand found his rifle as headlights appeared on the switchback road below. Multiple vehicles, moving slowly, lights extinguished until the final turn. They were coming. 4 vehicles rolled to a stop 50 yards from the house, just beyond the range of Jack's improvised perimeter alarms. Their headlights extinguished simultaneously with military precision that told Jack everything he needed to know. These weren't entitled teenagers playing at intimidation. These were professionals. Doors opened. 8 figures emerged, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done violence for money. Jack's trained eye cataloged details even in darkness. Tactical vests, not military issue, but commercial grade. Weapons carried low and ready. 2-man teams forming automatically, covering angles. Former military, probably private security contractors who decided ethics were negotiable when the price was right. Tyler Van Horn's voice carried through the night, amplified by a megaphone. Morrison, we know you're in there. You've got 2 minutes to walk out unarmed. Nobody else needs to get hurt tonight. Jack didn't respond. Verbal engagement would only provide them with precise location data. Instead, he shifted position, moving to a different window, rifle tracking targets. Beside him, Titan remained motionless, except for eyes that followed each threat with predatory focus. You're outnumbered and outgunned, Tyler continued. The teenager's voice carried false bravado. Someone playing at command while actual operators rolled their eyes at his amateur theatrics. My father is offering you $20,000 to walk away right now. Take it and disappear, or we come in and things get messy. Maggie's hand found Jack's arm in the darkness. Her grip was tight, fear and determination mixed. You could take the money, get yourself clear of this. I could, Jack said quietly. But then Emma grows up knowing that when things got hard, everyone abandoned her. That the powerful always win. That's not a world I want to help create. A new voice cut through the night, older and harder than Tyler's posturing. Last chance, Seal. We've all been where you are. Protective instincts, the hero complex. But this isn't Kandahar. These aren't civilians you're sworn to protect. This is a property dispute you inserted yourself into. Walk away with the payout and your life. Jack recognized the tone. A team leader, probably former Special Forces himself, trying to appeal to shared background. The man was right about one thing. This wasn't Afghanistan. Here, Jack didn't have air support, quick reaction forces, or legal protection of the uniform. He was alone, except for 1 dog and 2 people who couldn't fight. But he'd been alone before, and he'd learned long ago that the size of the fight mattered less than the reason for fighting. Titan, position 2, Jack whispered. The dog moved silently to the back door, taking overwatch on the rear approach. If they tried a 2-pronged assault, Titan would give warning and buy seconds. The 2 minutes expired. Jack watched the assault team leader make hand signals, professionals communicating without words. 4 men moved toward the house in tactical formation, while Tyler and 3 others remained with the vehicles, probably under orders to stay out of the actual violence. 50 yards. 40. The team moved smoothly, weapons up, covering each other's advance. These weren't men who'd make mistakes or break under pressure. Jack's mind calculated odds with the cold mathematics of combat experience. 8 of them, 1 of him. Rifle ammunition, 30 rounds loaded, plus 2 spare magazines. Sidearm as backup. Tactical advantage of defensive position, offset by their superior numbers and coordination. He could take maybe 3 before they adapted. The 4th would probably get him. At 30 yards, the team leader raised his fist. Full stop. Something had changed in their calculus. Jack heard it a second later, the distinctive sound of multiple vehicles approaching fast on the switchback road. The contractors heard it too, weapons swiveling toward the new threat. 3 vehicles crusted the rise. 2 sheriff's SUVs and a civilian truck. They stopped, blocking the road, and Deputy Simmons stepped out with 4 other officers. Not Briggs and his corrupt inner circle, Jack noted. These were younger deputies, the ones who joined law enforcement for the right reasons and were tired of being complicit in Van Horn's control. "Stand down," Simmons called out, his voice carrying authority he probably didn't legally have. "We've received reports of armed trespass and conspiracy to commit assault. Everyone on this property except the residents needs to clear out now." The contractor team leader pivoted, weapon lowering but not dropping. His voice carried dangerous calm. "Deputy, you're making a mistake. Mr. Van Horn has assured us this is a legal eviction enforcement. There's no eviction order filed with the county," Simmons countered, "which makes this an armed assault. You want to test whether killing a cop is worth whatever Van Horn is paying you?" Tension crystallized, that particular moment before violence where everyone calculates odds and consequences. Jack watched through his rifle scope, finger resting beside the trigger guard. If shooting started, he'd take the team leader first, disrupt command and control, then target whoever was dumb enough to aim at the deputies. Tyler's voice cracked through the standoff. "My father will have your jobs, all of you. You're finished in this county." "Maybe," Simmons said, "but we'll be finished with clean consciences. Can you say the same?" The contractor team leader made his decision. He lowered his weapon completely, signaled his men to do the same. "We're leaving, but understand, this isn't finished. Our contract remains active." "Then you'll be back to face federal charges when the FBI arrives Monday," Simmons replied. "Your call whether you want to add assaulting federal witnesses to your resume." The contractors retreated to their vehicles with professional discipline, no panic or scrambling. Within 2 minutes, all 4 vehicles had departed, taillights disappearing up the switchback. Simmons approached the house alone, hands visible and empty. Jack opened the door, rifle slung but accessible. "You just ended your career." "Probably." Simmons looked tired but satisfied. "But I joined to protect and serve, not to help rich men terrorize widows. 4 deputies with me feel the same. We figure we've got until morning before Briggs realizes what happened and comes for our badges. Thought you should know, Van Horn isn't stopping. Those contractors are on retainer. They'll wait for a better opportunity." "How many people does Van Horn have on payroll?" "In the department, Briggs and 6 others. In the town, maybe 20 key positions. Enough to control permits, legal processes, information flow. He's spent 15 years building this network." Simmons paused. "There's something else. Connor Reed, the kid your dog tackled. He's been running digital surveillance. Hacked Mrs. Chen's phone, her internet, probably has cameras positioned around the property. Van Horn knows your movements, your resources, everything you're planning." Jack processed that. Digital compromise was harder to counter than physical threats. "Can you get Connor picked up? Hacking is federal crime." "Not without evidence, and the only evidence is on his hardware. He's too smart to keep it somewhere we can access with local warrant." Simmons checked his watch. "You've got maybe 6 hours before Van Horn tries again. Use them well." The deputies left. Jack secured the door and turned to find Maggie staring at him with new understanding. "You knew they were coming. You prepared for this." "I prepared for possibilities. Having backup was luck." "How many more nights can we survive on luck?" Jack had no answer that wouldn't sound like false comfort. Instead, he moved through the house, rechecking security measures, looking for vulnerabilities Connor's surveillance might have revealed. When he reached Emma's room, he found the girl awake, clutching biscuit while Titan stood guard at the foot of her bed. "Are the bad men gone?" Emma whispered. "For now. Will they come back?" Jack sat on the edge of the bed, meeting her eyes. Lying to children did them no favors. "Yes, but each time they come, we'll be ready. And soon, people will arrive who can stop them permanently. You promise?" The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. Promises to children were sacred, especially when you might not survive to keep them. But Jack thought of Alicia, of every kid he'd encountered in war zones who'd asked similar questions. Sometimes the promise mattered more than the odds of fulfillment. "I promise," he said. Emma nodded, satisfied in the way children could be when an adult spoke with certainty. She curled closer to Disket and closed her eyes. Jack stayed until her breathing deepened into sleep, then returned to the living room where Maggie waited. "Connor's surveillance is the priority," Jack said. "If Van Horn knows our defensive positions, our resources, he can plan around them. We need that hardware." "How do we get it?" "You said local warrants won't work." "We don't get it legally." Jack pulled out his satellite phone, scrolled through contacts. "But I know someone who specializes in digital warfare. She owes me a favor." The call connected to a secure number in Virginia. A woman's voice answered, alert despite the late hour. Reaper? Didn't expect to hear from you in civilian life. I need a digital intrusion, Sarah. High school kid running surveillance and hacking. I need his systems fried and his data recovered. That's illegal without proper authorization. So is hacking a civilian's phone and internet. He's been at it for weeks, targeting a disabled woman. I need proof, and I need his capability neutralized. Silence while she considered. Then, give me the name and known addresses. I'll have my team run the intrusion remotely. If we're careful, he'll think it's random malware. Data recovery will take 12 hours. I've got until Monday morning when FBI arrives. Can you expedite? For you, we'll make it happen. But Jack, and you're burning bridges calling in favors like this. Whatever you're protecting must matter. Jack looked at Maggie, at the closed door to Emma's room, at Titan standing watch by the window. It does. He provided Connor's information and ended the call. Maggie wheeled closer, her face showing exhaustion and something else. Hope, maybe. That against impossible odds, they might actually survive this. Why are you really doing this? She asked. The truth, not the hero's speech. Jack was quiet for a long moment. In Kabul, my last mission, we extracted 12 people from a compound under fire. Everyone survived. Perfect operation, exactly by the book. Later I learned the intelligence was wrong. The people we extracted were connected to an enemy network. 6 months after we pulled them out, they helped plan an attack that killed 32 civilians. I saved them, and because I did, innocents died. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I followed orders, did my job, never questioned. Just pointed where they aimed me and pulled the trigger. Jack's hands clenched. I came here to escape that, to stop being responsible. Then I heard Emma scream, and I knew if I walked away, if something happened to you both, I'd never stop seeing her face. So maybe I'm not doing this for you. Maybe I'm doing it because I need to prove that sometimes the people I protect deserve protecting. Maggie reached out, took his hand. Then we're both fighting ghosts. Me trying to honor David's memory, you trying to balance scales that won't ever balance. Maybe that's enough reason to survive. Outside, storm clouds gathered again, the break in weather ending. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then building to the hammering intensity that characterized coastal Oregon autumns. Jack settled into watch position, knowing sleep was impossible. Titan neared him, both of them on alert, waiting for the next assault. It would come. Van Horn had invested too much money and reputation to back down now. The question wasn't if, but when and how brutal. Dawn was still hours away, and the night had only begun. Sunday morning arrived with false tranquility. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the sky scrubbed clean and painfully blue. Jack had maintained watch through the dark hours, rotating positions every 30 minutes to avoid pattern recognition if anyone was observing. Titan had alternated between perimeter checks and rest, the dog's intruo clock attuned to operational tempo after years of deployment. Around 0700, Jack's satellite phone buzzed. Sarah's voice carried satisfaction. We're in. Connor Reed's systems are compromised. Kid had decent security, but nothing our team couldn't breach. We've recovered surveillance footage, hacked communications, financial records showing payments from Van Horn. Everything you need for a federal case. Can you kill his capability? Already done. Planted malware that'll fry his hard drives if he tries to access anything. He's blind now. Data package is uploading to your contact at FBI as we speak. Jack allowed himself a moment of relief. One advantage eliminated. I owe you. You saved my brother in Fallujah. We're even. Sarah paused. Be careful, Jack. The communications we intercepted suggest Van Horn is desperate. Desperate men make lethal decisions. The call ended. Jack updated Maggie, who'd wheeled into the kitchen to start breakfast. Emma was still sleeping, exhausted by fear and disrupted routine. For a brief window, the house felt almost normal. Coffee brewing, morning light streaming through boarded windows, the smell of eggs cooking. Then Titan's head snapped toward the front door. The dog's body language shifted from relaxed to combat-ready in an instant. Jack grabbed his rifle, moved to the window, and saw a single figure approaching. Not the contractors from last night. This was a woman, late 20s, carrying a messenger bag instead of weapons. Jack recognized her from town. Sarah Kwan, the investigative journalist Maggie had mentioned. He opened the door cautiously, rifle visible but not aimed. "Miss Kwan, risky time for a visit." "I know." She glanced at the rifle without flinching. "I'm Sarah Kwan, Portland Tribune. I've been investigating Van Horn for 6 months. What happened Friday night, the attack on Mrs. Chen. It's exactly what I needed. Video evidence, witnesses, a pattern of escalation. But I need your statement." "Come inside." Over coffee, Sarah laid out her investigation. Garrett Van Horn had built his empire on coercion and corruption, spanning 2 decades. At least 7 families had been driven from waterfront property through intimidation. 2 suspicious deaths, including David Chen's accident, both conveniently timed to resolve Van Horn's business obstacles. Financial records suggesting money laundering through construction contracts. Payments to local officials documented through shell companies. "David was feeding me information before he died," Sarah explained. "He couldn't prosecute without more evidence, but he knew Van Horn was dirty. After the accident, I continued the investigation alone. Now with Connor Reed's surveillance data, Deputy Simmons' testimony, and your account of the attacks, I have enough to publish a story that'll bring state and federal attention Van Horn can't buy off." "When can you publish?" Jack asked. "Tomorrow morning, timed with FBI arrival. But Van Horn has people monitoring my activity. The moment I file the story, he'll know, which gives him tonight to make one final move before everything collapses." Maggie absorbed this. "So we're still targets, even more now because we're the witnesses." Sarah's expression was grim. "Which is why I'm staying. You need another set of eyes, and I've got contacts at state police who aren't compromised. They can be here in 90 minutes if we need backup." Jack evaluated her. "Former Army intelligence," Maggie had said. "That training would be useful. You understand if Van Horn comes at us tonight? It won't be arrests and lawsuits. It'll be bullets and body bags." "I understand. And I'm tired of watching good people get crushed while I just take notes." Sarah pulled a compact 9mm from her messenger bag. "I qualify expert at the range. I'm not helpless." They spent the morning fortifying further and coordinating with Simmons' group of honest deputies. The plan was simple: survive until federal authorities arrived Monday morning, with warrants and resources to dismantle Van Horn's network permanently. 18 hours. That was all they needed. Meanwhile, 15 miles north in his cliffside mansion, Garrett Van Horn was making his own plans. The study was crowded with people whose loyalty he'd purchased over years. Deputy Chief Briggs, pale and sweating. Mayor Thomas Aldridge, nervous but committed. The contractor team leader, professional and cold. 18 hours, Garrett said, his voice carrying the controlled fury of a man watching his empire crumble. "That's what we have before FBI agents who can't be bought arrive with federal warrants. Morrison's given them evidence. Connor's surveillance is compromised. That journalist has documentation of every transaction, every payment, every corner we cut. If they testify, if their evidence reaches court, we're all finished. So what's the play?" the contractor asked. Garrett turned from the window overlooking the Pacific. "We solve the problem permanently. Tonight. During the storm that's building offshore. No witnesses, no evidence, no case. The Chen house burns with everyone inside. Tragic accident, faulty wiring, terrible loss. By the time arson investigators arrive, if they look that carefully, the physical evidence will be ash." "That's 4 people now," Briggs said, voice shaking. "The woman, her kid, Morrison, and the journalist. That's not intimidation or property crime. That's mass murder. It's survival." Garrett's eyes were flat, devoid of anything resembling conscience. "You think federal prosecutors will accept your cooperation? You're in this as deep as I am, Warren. Your payments, your interference with investigations, your false reports. You either commit fully or spend 20 years in federal prison. Choose." The room fell silent. Each person confronted the mathematics of complicity. They'd all crossed lines, taken money, looked away from crimes. Now the bill was due, and the only payment Van Horn accepted was absolute loyalty to one final atrocity. "The storm hits around 2200 hours, the contractor said, military precision overriding moral consideration. Heavy rain, wind, poor visibility. Perfect conditions for assault. We go in fast, multiple entry points, overwhelmed through speed and violence. Morrison's good, but he's one man. We can take him. What about the deputies? Mayor Aldridge asked. Simmons and his group have been suspended as of this morning, Briggs said. I cited insubordination. They're civilians now. No authority to intervene. Garrett nodded. Then we're decided. Tonight, the problem ends. Permanently. Back at the Chen house, afternoon stretched with agonizing slowness. Jack conducted weapons checks, confirmed ammunition counts, walked the perimeter with Titan, identifying every possible approach route. Sarah established communication with her state police contacts, confirmed they'd staged 20 minutes away for rapid response. Maggie organized emergency supplies, kept Emma occupied with quiet activities that wouldn't reveal the terror simmering beneath adult calm. Around 1700 hours, Deputy Simmons called Jack's phone. It's happening tonight. Briggs suspended me and 4 others this morning. Van Horn's cleared the board of anyone who might interfere. Weather Service shows major storm hitting at 2200. That's when they'll come. How many? The contractor team, 8 men. Plus Tyler and his crew for support. Maybe 16 total. Jack, those are bad odds even for you. I've faced worse. Not entirely true, but confidence mattered. Can you and your deputies provide overwatch? You might be suspended, but you're still armed citizens. We'll be there, positioned on the ridge with long rifles. Can't stop a full assault, but we can make them think twice. The call ended. Jack gathered everyone in the living room. Maggie, Emma, Sarah, and both dogs. Outside, storm clouds gather on the horizon, dark and promising violence. They're coming tonight, Jack said, seeing no benefit in sugarcoating reality. Probably around 2200 when the storm hits. 16 men, with military training and the intention of making sure none of us testify tomorrow. Our advantage is defensive position, preparation, and the fact that we know they're coming. Our disadvantage is numbers. What are our chances? Sarah asked. Of survival? Maybe 50-50. Of holding long enough for backup to arrive and creating enough evidence that Van Horn can't cover it up? Better than 50-50. Jack looked at Emma, who watched him with those old eyes. I won't let them hurt you. That's a promise I intend to keep. Maggie took her daughter's hand. Emma and I will shelter in the bathroom. Interior room, no windows, solid walls. If anyone gets past you, that's where we make our stand. Jack nodded. The bathroom had become their final fallback position, stocked with supplies and a shotgun Maggie could use from her wheelchair if necessary. Not ideal, but warfare rarely was. They ate an early dinner, nobody tasting the food, then began the wait. Jack positioned himself near the front windows with clear sightlines. Sarah took the kitchen, covering the side approach. Titan ranged between positions, alert but controlled. Outside, the storm rolled in with meteorological fury, wind rising to gale force. Rain beginning as scattered drops that would soon become torrential. At 21:30, Jack's phone buzzed. Simmons, we're in position on the ridge. 4 deputies with hunting rifles and night vision. We've got overwatch on your location. Stay concealed until shooting starts. Don't reveal positions early. Understood. And Jack, good luck. The storm reached full intensity by 21:55. Rain hammered the roof like artillery. Wind shrieked through trees, bending them almost horizontal. Visibility dropped to near zero. Perfect conditions for assault. At exactly 2200 hours, Titan's body went rigid. His growl built from deep in his chest. Barely audible over the storm, Jack felt rather than heard the approach. Some sixth sense developed over years of combat, recognizing threat before conscious mind processed it. Then the night exploded. Flashbang grenades detonated against the house, concussive force shattering remaining glass, disorienting through sensory overload. The front door splintered inward under breaching charge. Figures poured through the opening, weapons up, moving with practiced coordination. Jack fired. The lead contractor went down, center mass. The second turned toward Jack's muzzle flash and caught 2 rounds that removed him from the fight. But more kept coming, overwhelming through sheer numbers. Titan, defend. The dog launched into the assault team like a missile. 95 pounds of trained aggression, hitting the third contractor with bone-breaking force. The man's scream cut through the chaos as Titan's jaws found his arm. Sarah fired from the kitchen, controlled pairs dropping another attacker, but they kept coming, professional and determined, pushing through casualties with the commitment of men who knew retreat meant prison. Jack transitioned to his sidearm as contractors closed distance, rifle combat giving way to close-quarters brutality. He put down 2 more, felt something slam into his vest, ballistic plate stopping the round but force driving air from his lungs. The house became a war zone. Gunfire, shouting, Titans snarling, the storm's roar all blending into sensory chaos. Jack fought with the mechanical precision of 12 years training. Each movement economical, each shot precisely placed. But there were too many. Then rifle fire cracked from the ridge. Simmons and his deputies, long-range precision, cutting into the assault team from unexpected angles. Contractors fell, others dove for cover, momentum disrupted. And through the chaos, Jack heard Emma scream. Someone had gotten past them. Jack moved before conscious thought finished processing. He vaulted over furniture, sprinting toward the hallway where Emma's scream had originated. Behind him, Sarah continued firing, holding the main assault while Simmons' rifles cracked from the ridge, each shot dropping another contractor. The bathroom door hung open, splintered. Inside, Tyler Van Horn had Maggie's wheelchair tipped backward against the wall, one hand gripping Emma's arm while the other held a pistol with the uncertain grip of someone who'd never actually fired at a living person. Biscuit lay motionless in the corner, struck by something heavy. The dog's chest rose and fell, alive but unconscious. Let her go. Jack's voice cut through the chaos with absolute calm, his sidearm trained on Tyler's center mass. You don't get it. Tyler's face was flushed, eyes wild with fear and adrenaline. My father owns everything. This town, these people, all of it. You can't just show up and destroy what he built. What he built was a criminal enterprise on the backs of people he terrorized. Jack advanced one careful step. Put the gun down and let the girl go. Last chance. Or what, you'll shoot me? You're the one who'll go to prison. Everyone will say I was defending my family's property from a violent drifter. Tyler's hand shook, finger on the trigger, desperation making him dangerous in the way amateurs always were. Emma whimpered, tears streaming down her face. Maggie struggled against the tipped wheelchair, unable to reach her daughter. And Jack calculated angles with the cold mathematics of combat experience. Tyler was using Emma as a partial shield, probably instinctively rather than tactically. A headshot was possible, but not guaranteed in poor light with a struggling hostage. Then Titan appeared in the doorway, silent as death, blood on his muzzle from the contractor outside. The dog's amber eyes locked on Tyler with predatory focus. Call him off. Tyler's voice cracked. Call few dog, or I swear I'll shoot. Titan, hold. Jack kept his weapon trained, mind racing through options. If Tyler fired, even missing Emma, the noise and muzzle flash in the confined bathroom would be devastating. If Jack fired and missed, Emma died. Stalemate, except Tyler was panicking, and panic made people do catastrophically stupid things. The sound of sirens cut through the storm, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Sarah's voice carried from the front room. State Police, 4 units inbound, 2 minutes out. Tyler's face twisted with understanding. His father's plan had failed. The assault team was decimated. Witnesses were alive, and now legitimate law enforcement was arriving. Everything was collapsing. It doesn't matter, Tyler said, voice breaking. You've already destroyed us. My father, everything he worked for. So if I'm going down, you're coming with me. The gun swung from Emma toward Jack. Time compressed the way it always did in life or death moments, each microsecond sketching. Jack saw Tyler's finger tightening on the trigger, saw the barrel aligning, calculated that even diving he wouldn't clear the line of fire before the round found him. Then Maggie Chen from her tipped wheelchair did something remarkable. She lunged forward with every ounce of upper body strength she'd developed in 3 years of disability, grabbed Tyler's gun arm and wrenched it downward. The pistol discharged, round punching through floorboards instead of flesh. Titan take. The dog moved like lightning. He hit Tyler with precisely calibrated force, jaws clamping on the gun arm, teeth finding bone. Tyler's scream was primal as the pistol clattered away. Jack kicked it clear, hauled Emma into his arms, passed her to Sarah, who'd appeared in the hallway. Outside, the assault had collapsed. Contractors who weren't dead or incapacitated were fleeing into the storm, hunted by Simmons and his deputies. State police vehicles screamed into the property, armed troopers spreading through the scene with professional precision. Jack pinned Tyler to the floor, while Titan maintained his grip. Release. The dog stepped back, blood and saliva dripping from his muzzle, eyes never leaving the threat. Jack zip-tied Tyler's hands with practiced efficiency, then helped Maggie right her wheelchair. She was shaking, but whole, her eyes fierce with the adrenaline of survival. "Emma?" Maggie's voice cracked. "She's safe. Sarah has her." Jack moved to check on Biscuit. The golden retriever was stirring, a nasty lump on his head but otherwise intact. "Your dog's going to be fine too." State Police Captain Rebecca Torres entered the bathroom, surveying the scene with the expression of someone who walked into the aftermath of a war. "Jack Morrison?" Special Agent Marsh called ahead, said we'd find an interesting situation. She undersold it. "Situation's contained," Jack said, hauling Tyler to his feet. "This one's the developer's son. He just attempted murder of a minor and assault on a disabled woman in front of witnesses. The men outside are part of a coordinated assault team hired to commit mass murder. You'll find 8 contractors dead or wounded, all of them armed with illegal weapons and employed by Garrett Van Horn." Torres's radio crackled. "Captain, we've got a situation at the Van Horn estate. Suspect is barricaded, threatening suicide." "I'm en route." Torres looked at Jack. "You saved lives tonight, but you also created a massacre. Federal investigators will want detailed statements from everyone." "We'll cooperate fully," Jack said. "Everything we did was defensive, witnessed, and necessary to prevent murder." The next hours blurred together. EMTs arrived, treating wounded, pronouncing dead. Sarah's photographer captured evidence before bodies were moved. Deputy Simmons and his team were processed as civilian witnesses who'd provided overwatch that likely saved Jack's life. Emma and Maggie were evaluated, found physically intact but psychologically traumatized in ways that would require years to heal. By dawn, the property was a crime scene, yellow tape everywhere, forensic teams documenting every detail. Jack sat on the porch steps, Titan pressed against his leg, both of them exhausted beyond words. Sarah Kwan emerged from her car when coffee and sat beside him. "FBI arrested Van Horn an hour ago," she said. "Didn't kill himself after all, just wanted to negotiate." "They're not negotiating. Between Connor's data, your testimony, and 8 dead contractors on his payroll, he's looking at RICO charges, motor conspiracy, the whole package." The town? Deputy Chief Briggs and 6 officers are under arrest. Mayor Aldridge resigned. 23 people connected to Van Horn's network are being rounded up as we speak. It'll take months to process, but the corruption's being cut out. Jack sipped coffee that tasted like redemption. "What about Maggie and Emma?" "Victim Services is setting them up with counseling, security, financial assistance." David's encrypted files were cracked overnight. Turns out he'd documented everything, enough evidence to support multiple prosecutions. His death wasn't in vain. They sat in silence, watching the sun rise over the Pacific. The storm had passed, leaving the world scrubbed clean. Around them, law enforcement continued their methodical documentation of the night's violence. 3 months later, Jack stood in the same spot, but everything had changed. The Chen house had been repaired, expanded with settlement money from Van Horn's seized assets. A wheelchair ramp led to a new deck. Deck overlooking the water. Gardens that Emma tended flourished in spring sunshine. Inside, Maggie worked at her laptop, testimony prepared for the trial that would start in 2 weeks. Emma played with Biscuit and Titan, both dogs fully recovered and inseparable. The girl laughed, a sound Jack had thought might be lost forever in that bathroom 3 months ago. Sarah Kwan had won a Pulitzer nomination for her investigative series. Deputy Simmons was now interim sheriff, cleaning house and rebuilding the department around integrity instead of corruption. Pine Haven was healing, slowly, learning to be a community instead of a fiefdom. Jack had stayed, initially just until the immediate danger passed, then through the investigation, then because he realized he'd found something here worth protecting. Not just Maggie and Emma, but the idea that good people could defeat institutional evil if someone stood with them long enough. He'd accepted a position as Pine Haven's emergency management coordinator, a civilian role that used his military expertise without requiring him to deploy. It wasn't peace exactly. The nightmares still came. The guilt over Kabul still gnawed. But it was purpose, and purpose was enough. Maggie wheeled onto the deck, Emma following with a plate of cookies she'd baked. Titan and Biscuit flanked them, protective and content. The four of them, plus two dogs, had become something like family. Not replacing what they'd lost, but building something new from shared trauma and survival. FBI called, Maggie said. Van Horn took a plea deal, life without parole to avoid death penalty. Tyler got 20 years. The contractors who survived are all facing murder conspiracy charges. It's over then, Emma said, her voice carrying hope that had been absent for so long. This part is, Jack confirmed, but there are other Pine Havens, other people like Van Horn, other families that need protection. Are you leaving? Emma's eyes widened with fear. No. Jack crouched to her level, the same way he had that first night. I'm staying, but maybe eventually, when you're both completely safe, I'll help other people the way I helped you. Because I learned something these past months. Being a warrior isn't about fighting endless wars in foreign countries. It's about standing up when others can't. Protecting the innocent at home. Making sure people like your mom never have to face darkness alone. Maggie smiled, the first genuine smile Jack had seen from her. David would have liked knowing someone like you existed. Someone who actually meant it when they swore to protect and serve. Titan pressed against Jack's leg, warm and solid. The dog's amber eyes held understanding that transcended words. They'd both come to Pine Haven broken, seeking isolation from trauma they couldn't escape. Instead, they'd found purpose in protection, redemption in standing between innocence and evil. The Pacific stretched to the horizon, endless and indifferent. But on this small piece of coastline, in this house that had become a fortress and then a home, justice had prevailed. Not through systems or institutions, but through one person's refusal to walk away when it would have been easier, safer, smarter. Sometimes that was all it took. One person willing to stand. One dog trained to protect. One promise kept against impossible odds. Jack looked at Emma, at Maggie, at the life they were rebuilding from ashes. He thought of Alicia, his goddaughter, and all the children who deserved to grow up safe. He thought of every mission, every deployment, every time he'd wondered if the violence served any real purpose. Here, in this moment, he had his answer. Come on, Emma said, tugging his hand. Mom made lunch and Sarah's coming over. She wants to interview you about starting a program to help other people in situations like ours. Jack followed her inside, Titan at his heel, and for the first time since Kabul, he felt something he'd thought was lost forever. Not happiness, exactly. Not the absence of pain, but contentment. The bone-deep satisfaction of knowing he'd made a difference that mattered. Because somewhere out there, another family was waiting for someone to care enough to stand between them and darkness. And when duty called, as it inevitably would, Jack Morrison and Titan would answer. Not because they had to, but because some protectors never truly retire. They just find new battles worth fighting. And this one, saving the innocent from the powerful, was a war Jack intended to wage for as long as he drew breath. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Jack's position? Would you have walked away, or would you have stood and fought? Share your thoughts, and remember, sometimes all it takes to change the world is one person refusing to look away when evil shows its face. God bless you all, and may you never need a protector like Jack Morrison. But if you do, may you find one just as brave, just as committed, and just as unwilling to abandon those who cannot fight for themselves. Because in the end, that's what heroes are. Not people without fear, but people who act despite it. Not those seeking glory, but those who simply cannot walk away when someone needs help. Be that person. Stand for something. And when darkness comes calling, be the light that refuses to be extinguished.